know a little bit about what's not going to be in this report. We know from the Attorney General, Bill Barr, that Robert Mueller did not find that the president or anybody in the Trump campaign engaged in a criminal conspiracy here. We also know that Mueller didn't take a stand, ultimately, didn't make a traditional prosecutorial judgment on the issue of obstruction of justice. So that leaves a number of open questions here as to what exactly we will find in this report. And a couple of things that people who've been following this case very carefully will like to know as the day goes forward. One was, why was Mueller unable to come to a conclusion about obstruction of justice? The Attorney General says there's going to be evidence on both sides of that question, so observers will be eager to see what that evidence is on both sides. Also, did any Americans work with Russian front groups? The idea is here that Barr has said that no Americans or nobody in the Trump campaign worked directly with the Russians. Did they work, though, with Guccifer 2.0 or other Russian cutout groups in the course of this election interference? Also, who directed Roger Stone's contact with WikiLeaks? That's something that's been hanging out there since one of the indictments earlier this year. And then what did former White House counsel Don McGahn tell the Mueller investigators in more than 30 hours of testimony? A lot of unanswered questions here still as we go forward. The question of the day, though, is how is this all going to unfold? We know that Bob Barr is going to hold a press conference at 9:30 this morning over at the Department of Justice. Democrats are saying that's playing politics with all of this because he's going to hold the press conference at 9:30 but not release the Mueller report until 11 a.m. Up to Capitol Hill, and it's not clear exactly when in the afternoon the public will be able to see it. So none of the reporters asking Bob Barr questions at the press conference this morning will have read the Mueller report. Jerry Nadler, the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, said that's just politics. Here's what he said last night.
The Attorney General appears to be waging a media campaign on behalf of President Trump, the very subject of the investigation at the heart of the Mueller report. Rather than letting the facts of the report speak for themselves, the Attorney General has taken unprecedented steps to spin Mueller's nearly two-year investigation.
So, Andrew, this was contentious all the way through, and it appears that even the rollout of the Mueller report and the format of it, that'll be contentious today as well.
Hey, Eamon, you know, when we set this segment up before the break, we said, you know, will the headlines that come out of this report today have an impact on the markets, have an impact on investors? Speculate for us in terms of just to the extent you think that there are things in there that people could read that could impact the markets one way or the other.
Look, I think there's two things that would impact the markets here. One is the idea of whether or not this would impact the president's 2020 re-election chances. If there's some sense here that there's some bombshell that we weren't expecting and that changes the projection for Trump 2020, I think that might impact the markets. And then ultimately, if there's something that changes the trajectory in terms of impeachment in the short term, Democrats have been backing away from the idea of impeachment, led by Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi. But if there's some bombshell in here that indicates that Democrats might suddenly start to ramp up impeachment proceedings, I think that could impact the markets as well. But that's not what's expected today. I don't think anybody watching this expects to see a major bombshell in here. I think what people expect is something below that level of things that are politically damaging, potentially embarrassing for the president that will come out in this report. But we'll have to wait and see because we just don't have any idea. The Mueller team and the Department of Justice has been almost entirely leak-free throughout this entire process. So that's why everyone's going to be so eager to actually read this report today.
Eamon, you know, just in terms of reading the tea leaves, I've seen some of the Democratic candidates, the ones that are out there talking for 2020 elections, saying we need to move on, which makes me think that they're starting to think that maybe they need to move on. You saw the poll. Did it change your view of Trump? Did it make you like him more, like him less, doesn't care? I think 65% said that it came out and didn't change anything. And it was like low numbers on whether it... The other thing is,
well, it hasn't come out yet. We have to wait and see what happens today, right?
No,
I mean, there could be some revelations in here that are embarrassing for the president, but not criminal.
No, but the point is that you could see him totally saying, I'm so mad in these tweets. This guy, what's he doing? I want him to stop. You could see all that stuff. That's so far from, hi, Vladimir, what should I do now? You've got all this info on me. You elected me president. Right. What am I supposed... That's so far from what... And also with the obstruction thing. The reason it's hard to prove criminal intent How do you know when Trump was just venting and mad that this thing was going on, which he called a witch hunt all along? How do you know it's obstruction, proving criminal intent that he wanted it to stop, and just not being totally PO'd about the whole process because there was nothing there? How do you?
Yeah, look, intent is very difficult. You've got to get inside the person's head, and with this president, it's particularly difficult because so much of what
I know you understood what I just said, though. If he's not blocking it for a reason. I know that you don't need a crime to have obstruction, but still, it's hard to prove criminal intent for that obstruction if he's not trying. If there's nothing he's trying.
And that may be what Mueller ran up against. In the end.
It is likely to display some form of bad or questionable behavior across the board.
You've been talking about it for 2.5 years. All the other questionable bad behavior.
It's hard to imagine
those
that
400 pages say
400-page report.
The 400 pages say something, right?
It's going to say something
in those 400 pages.
There's no,
it's not 400 blank pages.
Stormy and everything else. I mean, there's bad behavior everywhere. There's
bad behavior
Hollywood.
So I'm just suggesting to you that
I know that
headlines are going to come. It's not
people knew about a lot of bad behavior before the election.
As to Joe's point, Joe's making the point right now. The Trump base is not likely to be moved by anything we learned today, right?
Eamon,
I mean, they've tolerated enormous amounts of political.
One piece I just wanted to grab on you real quick, which is that there's Giuliani, I think, was out last night. That I just want to understand the communication between Barr and the White House ahead of this report, this idea of a rebuttal report that may come out right after it. By the way, Joe, if the report is supposed to make President Trump look so great, which the president has said now multiple times, why would you have this rebuttal report ready to go? Just speak to that, Eamon.
Yeah, what we do know from the New York Times' reporting is that the Department of Justice and the White House have engaged in some level of conversation about what's in this report. Critics will seize on that and say the Department of Justice is being unfair here because they're letting the White House know in advance so they can prepare the best possible political response. I know from my own reporting with the Trump legal team that they have prepared a rebuttal report. We believe it's somewhere in the 30-page range, and they're prepared to release some or all of that today, depending on what we see in the Mueller report, ultimately. And they'll respond as they see fit. You know, there are some in the White House who figure, look, we've already won this thing politically, so let's not respond to any of these smaller little things as we go along. Let's just stick to the president's line of no collusion, no obstruction, and move on.
Eamon, don't assume it's going to be all defense either, because you're going to hear the offense is going to start coming with, we need a grand jury to look at how this all started, and the dossier, and the FISA unmasking, and I mean, they're going to go on offense on this.
And one of the things people in the White House are worried about is now the president will know who talked to Mueller and what they said, and there could be some vengeance there from the president among people on his own team and close into his orbit.